The grandfather clock in Dante Moretti's private office strikes 2 in the morning, each chime echoing through the cavernous room like a death knell. And I stand before his massive mahogany desk, with my heart hammering so violently against my ribcage that I'm certain he can hear it, can sense my terror the way a predator senses the frantic pulse of cornered prey. My fingers tremble as they clutch the small plastic stick that holds my entire future, my entire world, and possibly my last remaining hours of life within its tiny display window, the 2 pink lines seeming to glow in the dim lamplight like a condemnation, like a signed confession to a crime that, in Dante's world, carries only 1 sentence. He sits behind that desk like a king upon his throne, perfectly still except for the rhythmic swirling of amber whiskey in his crystal glass. And his eyes, those cold, steel-gray eyes that have watched men beg for their lives, that have ordered executions with nothing more than a subtle nod, are fixed on me with an intensity that makes my knees want to buckle, makes every survival instinct in my body scream at me to run, to flee, to do anything except stand here and speak the words that will shatter the fragile peace between us. The gun resting beside his whiskey glass gleams dully in the lamplight, a casual reminder of the power he wields, the violence he's capable of unleashing with those elegant hands that are now steepled beneath his chin as he studies me with an expression I cannot read. And I wonder if this is how all his victims feel in their final moments. This strange mixture of terror and resignation. This awful knowledge that their fate rests entirely in the hands of a man who has built an empire on fear and blood and unwavering loyalty. I have been married to Dante Moretti for exactly 8 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days, though calling it a marriage feels like a mockery of the word, like calling a gilded cage freedom, or naming a business transaction love, because our union was arranged by our families to merge 2 powerful criminal dynasties, to create an alliance that would make the Moretti-Romano partnership the most feared organization in New York's underworld. And from the moment I walked down that aisle in a dress that cost more than most people's homes, I knew I was nothing more than a beautiful bargaining chip, a trophy wife to be displayed at his functions, and kept pristine in his penthouse like just another expensive acquisition. He has never raised his voice to me, has never lifted a hand against me, has provided me with everything money can buy. Designer clothes that hang unworn in closets the size of apartments, jewelry that weighs heavy and cold against my skin like shackles made of diamonds, cars I don't drive, and credit cards with no limits. But he has also never touched me with tenderness, never looked at me with anything resembling warmth, never made me feel like anything more than an obligation he fulfills, with the same cold efficiency he brings to his business dealings. Our bedroom encounters, few and far between, have been mechanical and distant, his body moving over mine with practiced skill, but absolute emotional detachment. And afterward he always returns to his own bedroom on the opposite side of the penthouse, leaving me alone in silk sheets that cost thousands, but feel like ice against my skin. And I have spent countless nights staring at the ceiling of my prison, wondering if this emptiness, this soul-crushing loneliness, is all that remains of my life, if I will spend the next 40 or 50 years as nothing more than Mrs. Dante Moretti, a beautiful ghost haunting the halls of his empire. That loneliness, that desperate aching need to feel something, anything, to be seen as more than an asset or a possession, is what led me into Marco's arms 6 months ago. Though even as I think his name, my stomach clenches with a mixture of longing and guilt so powerful it nearly brings me to my knees. Marco Moretti, Dante's younger cousin and underboss, the second most powerful man in the organization, with his warm brown eyes that actually saw me as a person, with his easy laugh that made me remember what joy felt like, with his gentle hands that touched me like I was precious, like I was something to be cherished rather than owned. And God help me. I fell for him so completely, so desperately, that for a few stolen months I actually believed I could have something real, something true, even if it had to exist in shadows and secret moments and lies. We met in empty warehouses and hotel rooms registered under false names, and he made love to me like I was his entire world, whispering promises against my skin that I wanted so badly to believe. telling me that he loved me, that he would find a way for us to be together, that somehow we would escape this impossible situation. And I clung to those promises even though some part of me knew they were built on sand, knew that in Dante's world, betrayal of this magnitude had only one ending, and it would be written in blood. But Marco ended it 3 weeks ago, standing in our usual hotel room with tears streaming down his face, as he told me he couldn't do it anymore, couldn't betray Dante any longer. That loyalty to family was everything in our world, and he had already crossed too many lines, committed too many sins against the man who had raised him like a brother. And I had watched the only light in my darkness walk away from me, leaving me more alone than I had ever been, more desperate, more broken. I had thrown myself into existing, into playing the role of the perfect Mafia wife with mechanical precision, attending Dante's functions on his arm with a smile painted on my face, hosting dinners for his associates with flawless grace, and never, not once, letting anyone see the devastation that was eating me alive from the inside. Because showing weakness in this world is as good as signing your own death warrant. And I had already made enough mistakes to last a lifetime. The pregnancy test in my hand is the consequence of those mistakes, the physical manifestation of my betrayal, and there is absolutely no way to hide it, no way to explain it away. Because Dante and I haven't shared a bed in over 2 months, haven't been in the same room alone for longer than absolutely necessary, and he will know. The moment I tell him, he will know that this child growing inside me is not his, could never be his, and the question is not whether he will kill me for this betrayal, but only how much he will make me suffer first. "You've been standing there for 5 minutes, Isabella," Dante says finally, his voice that low, dangerous purr that makes grown men flinch, though there's something else underneath it now, something that might be curiosity, or might be the calm before the storm. And I watch his fingers tighten almost imperceptibly around his whiskey glass, the only sign that he is not as relaxed as he appears. "If you have something to say to me, say it, because I have an early meeting with the Calabrese family, and I would prefer to get at least a few hours of sleep before I have to convince them not to start a war over their nephew's unfortunate accident." His words are casual, but there is nothing casual about the way he looks at me, the way those steel-gray eyes catalog every trembling breath I take, every slight shift of my weight from one foot to the other. And I know he has already sensed that something is wrong, that this late-night visit to his private sanctuary is not about some trivial household matter or social obligation. And predator that he is simply waiting to see what kind of prey has wandered into his den. I force myself to take a step forward, then another, my heels clicking against the marble floor with a sound like gunshots in the heavy silence. And when I finally reach his desk, I place the pregnancy test on its polished surface with fingers that shake so badly I nearly drop it, and I watch his eyes flick down to the small plastic stick, watch his expression shift from mild irritation to confusion as he processes what he is seeing. Those 2 pink lines that declare in their simple, undeniable way that I am carrying a child. "I'm pregnant," I whisper, my voice barely audible even in the silence of the room, and I watch understanding begin to dawn on his face, watch him start to calculate the timeline, and I force myself to continue before I lose my nerve entirely, before the words stick in my throat and choke me. "The baby isn't yours, Dante," I say, and even as the confession leaves my lips, I marvel at how calm I sound, how steady, when inside I am screaming. Inside I am already dying 1,000 different deaths, imagining all the ways this could end, all the ways he could make me pay for this ultimate betrayal. The silence that follows my confession is so complete, so absolute, that I can hear my own heartbeat thundering in, my ears can hear the soft tick of that grandfather clock marking off what might be the last seconds of my life. And Dante simply sits there, perfectly still, his face an emotionless mask that reveals nothing of whatever storm might be raging beneath that carefully controlled exterior. I wait for the explosion, for him to surge to his feet and reach for that gun, for his hands to close around my throat, for the rage and violence I know he is capable of to finally be directed at me. And part of me almost welcomes it. Almost prefers a quick death to the agonizing suspense of not knowing what he will do. How he will make me suffer for daring to cuckold the most powerful mafia boss in New York. But he doesn't move, doesn't speak. Just sits there with that whiskey glass in his hand, and the silence stretches on until I think I might start screaming just to break it. Just to force some kind of reaction from the man who holds my life in his hands, and I realize that this terrible, suffocating silence might be worse than any violence he could inflict. "Whose is it?" he asks finally, his voice so soft, so dangerously quiet that I have to strain to hear him. And there is something in his tone that makes ice flood through my veins, something that suggests he already knows the answer, is simply testing to see if I will lie to him again, compound my betrayal with dishonesty. I close my eyes, unable to bear the weight of his gaze any longer, unable to watch whatever emotion might finally break through that mask, and I force myself to give him the truth, the whole terrible truth, because I owe him that much at least. Owe him honesty, even if it seals my fate. "Marcos," I breathe, and I hear the word land like a bomb between us, hear the sharp intake of breath that tells me I have finally cracked his control, finally provoked something beyond that cold indifference. And when I open my eyes, I see that he has set down his whiskey glass and is gripping the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles have gone white. And there is something in his expression now that I cannot name. Something that looks almost like pain before it disappears behind that emotionless mask again. He stands slowly, deliberately, every movement controlled and precise, and I force myself not to flinch, not to back away, because I know that running would only make things worse, would trigger his predator's instinct to chase, to hunt, and I have already sealed my fate with my confession, have already placed myself entirely at his mercy. Dante walks around the desk with the fluid grace of a big cat, and I tilt my head back to maintain eye contact as he approaches, refusing to cower, even though every cell in my body is screaming at me to drop to my knees and beg for forgiveness, to plead for my life, to promise him anything if he will just let me live. He stops so close to me that I can smell his cologne, expensive and masculine and achingly familiar, can feel the heat radiating from his body, and I wait for his hands to close around my throat, wait for the end to come. But instead he simply looks at me with those penetrating gray eyes, studying my face as if seeing me for the first time, as if searching for something in my features that he has never noticed before. "Does Marco know?" he asks, and the question surprises me so much that I actually gasp, because of all the things I expected him to say, all the accusations and threats I was prepared for. This was not among them, and I shake my head frantically, my hair falling around my face in waves that I have not bothered to tame. "No," I tell him, my voice stronger now, steadier, because at least this is a truth that might save Marco's life, might protect the man I thought I loved from the consequences of our actions. "He ended things 3 weeks ago, said he couldn't betray you anymore, that his loyalty to you and the family was more important than what we had. And I haven't told him about the pregnancy, haven't told anyone, because I knew, God, Dante, I knew what this would mean, knew that I was signing my own death warrant. But I couldn't hide it. Couldn't lie about this. Not when it would become obvious in a few months anyway. I am rambling now, words spilling out of me in a desperate rush, and I hate how weak I sound. How pathetic. But I cannot seem to stop myself, cannot seem to control the flood of confessions and explanations that pour from my lips. Something shifts in Dante's expression at my words, something that makes my breath catch in my throat, and he takes another step closer to me, backing me up against the wall beside his desk until I am trapped between his body and the cold plaster, and I brace myself for violence, for pain, for whatever punishment he has decided I deserve. But instead of his hands closing around my throat, instead of feeling the cold press of his gun against my temple, I feel his palm settle gently, almost reverently, against my still flat stomach. And the gesture is so unexpected, so completely contrary to everything I anticipated, that I freeze, hardly daring to breathe, hardly daring to move as I try to understand what is happening. His hand is warm through the thin silk of my nightgown, his touch gentle in a way I have never experienced from him, and he stands there for a long moment with his palm pressed against the place where Marco's child is growing, and I watch his face transform into something I have never seen before, something that looks almost like wonder, almost like longing, before it hardens into determination. "This child will be mine," Dante says, his voice low and intense, each word precisely enunciated, and I stare at him in absolute shock, my mind unable to process what I am hearing, unable to reconcile his words with everything I know about him, about his world, about the laws that govern our lives. Marco will never know the truth about his paternity, will never have any claim to this baby, and you, Isabella, will learn what it truly means to belong to me, what it means to be my wife in truth and not just in name. His hand presses more firmly against my stomach, possessive and claiming, and I see something blazing in his eyes now, something fierce and dangerous and utterly uncompromising. "You will play the role of devoted, loving wife so convincingly that no one, not Marco, not our families, not anyone in our world, will ever doubt that this child is the product of our marriage, the heir to my empire, and in exchange I will allow you and this baby to live, will protect you both with everything I have. But understand this, Isabella. Any deviation from this arrangement, any hint that you are anything less than completely mine, and I will put a bullet in Marco's head and make you watch before I decide what to do with you." The threat hangs in the air between us, terrible and absolute, and I realize with a clarity that steals my breath that I have just been given an impossible choice, a devil's bargain that will either save us all or destroy us more completely than any bullet could. I look into Dante's eyes and see that he means every word, that this is not a bluff or a manipulation but a genuine offer born from motivations I cannot begin to understand. And I know that I have seconds to decide, seconds to choose between protecting the man I thought I loved and protecting the child growing inside me, between accepting this dark bargain or condemning us all to the only other ending available in this world of blood and violence. "Why?" I whisper, the question tearing itself from my throat, because I need to understand, need to know why the man I have betrayed, the man I have wronged in the most fundamental way possible, is offering me salvation instead of vengeance, is claiming another man's child instead of eliminating the evidence of my infidelity. Dante's hand slides up from my stomach to cup my face with surprising gentleness, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone in a gesture that feels almost tender, almost loving. And when he speaks, his voice is rough with an emotion I cannot name. "Because you are mine, Isabella," he says simply, as if this explains everything, as if these 5 words contain all the justification he needs for this impossible decision. "You have been mine since the moment your father signed those marriage contracts, since the moment you walked down that aisle in that white dress, and what is mine, I keep, I protect, I claim, regardless of whose DNA might be swimming around in that child's cells." He leans in closer, his lips almost brushing my ear, and I shiver at his proximity, at the heat of his breath against my skin. "And you, my beautiful wife, are about to discover that I am a far more possessive, far more demanding husband than you ever imagined, because the distance between us ends tonight. The cold formality of our arrangement ends tonight. And when I am done with you, when I have claimed every inch of you as thoroughly as I am going to claim this baby, you will never again look at another man the way you looked at Marco, will never again let anyone else touch what belongs to me." His words send a shudder through my entire body, equal parts terror and something else, something I dare not examine too closely. And I realize that in trying to escape one prison I have walked willingly into another, one that might be even more inescapable, even more dangerous, because Dante Moretti does not make idle threats, does not speak carelessly. And if he says he is going to claim me, possess me, make me his in ways I have never been before, then that is exactly what he intends to do. And I will have no choice but to submit, to accept, to transform myself into the devoted wife he demands I become, or watch everything I care about burn to ashes around me. Dante's hand remains possessively splayed across my stomach as he leads me out of his office, his grip on my waist firm enough to convey ownership but gentle enough not to bruise, and I am acutely aware of every point of contact between us, every place where his body heat seeps through the thin silk of my nightgown and brands my skin with the physical reminder that I belong to him now, in ways I never have before, in ways that terrify me more than the threat of death ever could. The penthouse is silent at this hour. All the staff long since retired to their quarters, and our footsteps echo through the marble hallways as he guides me through rooms I have inhabited for 8 months, but never truly occupied, past priceless artwork and designer furniture that have always felt like stage dressing for a life I was never meant to actually live. And I realize with a sinking sensation in my chest that everything is about to change, that the comfortable distance I have maintained between myself and this dangerous man is about to be obliterated, and there will be no going back to the cold formality of separate bedrooms and polite indifference when we reach the double doors of the master suite, his suite, the one I have never entered in all our months of marriage. Dante pauses with his hand on the ornate handle, and he turns to look at me with an expression that is equal parts predatory satisfaction and something else, something that looks almost like anticipation, almost like hunger, and his voice when he speaks is low and rough with promise. "You understand what is about to happen, don't you, Isabella?" he asks, though it is not really a question. Not really a request for clarification, but rather a statement of intent, a warning that I am about to cross a threshold from which there will be no return. "You are going to sleep in my bed from this moment forward, are going to wake up wrapped in my arms every morning, are going to become so accustomed to my touch, my scent, my presence that you will never again feel complete without me. And this is not negotiable, not temporary, not something you can endure until the baby is born and hope to return to your isolated little sanctuary across the penthouse." His fingers tighten fractionally on my waist, pulling me closer until our bodies are pressed together, and I can feel every hard plane of his chest, every controlled breath he takes. "By the time our daughter or son enters this world, you will be mine in every sense of the word, and the ghost of what you felt for Marco will be nothing but a distant memory, burned away by what I am going to make you feel for me." The audacity of his statement, the sheer arrogance of his certainty that he can simply manufacture emotions, manipulate my feelings until I forget the man I thought I loved and fall for the one I married, should infuriate me, should make me want to fight back against this cage he is constructing around me with such calculated precision. But instead I find myself trembling with something that is not entirely fear, something that responds to the dark promise in his words in ways I do not want to examine. He pushes open the doors to reveal a room I have only glimpsed in passing, a masculine space dominated by a massive 4-poster bed that looks like it belongs in a medieval castle, all dark wood and rich fabrics in shades of charcoal and burgundy, and everything in the room speaks of power and wealth and a sensuality I never associated with the cold, distant man I married. From the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the glittering expanse of Manhattan, to the fireplace where flames already flicker, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with bookshelves and what appears to be an extensive collection of rare whiskeys. Dante releases me long enough to shrug out of his suit jacket and drape it carefully over a chair, and I watch the play of muscles beneath his shirt as he moves with that economical grace that speaks of a man completely comfortable in his own body, completely certain of his own power. And when he turns back to me, I see something in his expression that makes my pulse quicken, makes heat pool low in my belly despite everything that has happened tonight, despite the threat implicit in every word he has spoken. "Come here," he commands softly. and it is absolutely a command despite the gentleness of his tone, and I find my feet carrying me toward him before my mind has consciously made the decision to obey. And I hate myself for this automatic submission, even as some part of me recognizes that resistance at this point would be not only futile but dangerous. That I have already agreed to his devil's bargain and must now live with the consequences. He reaches out to brush my hair back from my face, his fingers tangling in the long waves with a possessiveness that makes me shiver. And then his hands move to the delicate straps of my nightgown, sliding them slowly down my shoulders until the silk pools at my feet. And I am standing before him in nothing but the moonlight streaming through those massive windows, completely exposed, completely vulnerable, and instead of the detached, mechanical appraisal I have grown accustomed to in our previous encounters, I see heat in his eyes now, genuine desire that transforms his face into something almost human, almost approachable. "You are exquisite," he murmurs, his hands skimming over my body with a reverence that steals my breath. And when his palm settles once again over my stomach, there is something almost worshipful in the gesture. Something that suggests he is not merely claiming another man's child, but genuinely anticipating the life growing there, and the contradiction of his nature, brutal mafia boss and tender protector, makes my head spin. What follows is unlike anything I have experienced in our previous encounters, unlike the cold, efficient coupling that characterized our wedding night, and the handful of times after when duty demanded we at least attempt to produce an heir. Because Dante touches me now, like he is memorizing every curve, every sensitive spot, every place that makes me gasp or arch into his hands, and he is patient in ways I never imagined he could be, coaxing responses from my body that I do not want to give, that feel like betrayals of everything I thought I felt for Marco, but that I cannot seem to control. He whispers against my skin in Italian, words I only half understand but that sound like possession and promise and dark devotion. And when he finally lays me down on that massive bed and covers my body with his own, I feel simultaneously claimed and cherished, owned and protected. And the cognitive dissonance of these competing emotions makes tears leak from the corners of my eyes, even as pleasure builds under his skilled touch. Afterward, when I am certain he will retreat to the bathroom, or perhaps dismiss me back to my own room despite his earlier declarations, Dante instead pulls me against his chest and wraps his arms around me with a possessiveness that leaves no room for misinterpretation, arranging my body against his as if I am a puzzle piece that has finally found its proper place, and his hand finds my stomach again, resting there with a gentleness that seems at odds with everything I know about this dangerous man. "Tell me about him," he says quietly, and for a moment I do not understand what he is asking, my mind still foggy with endorphins and exhaustion and the emotional whiplash of this entire surreal night. But then his hand presses more firmly against my belly, and I realize he is asking about the baby, about the child that is not his, but that he has claimed with such absolute certainty. I swallow hard against the lump forming in my throat, trying to find words that will not damn me further, that will not reveal too much about the affair I have already confessed to. But Dante's fingers trace idle patterns on my skin, and his voice when he speaks again is surprisingly patient, surprisingly understanding. "I am not asking you to tell me you love Marco, Isabella, or to recount your affair in explicit detail because frankly I do not need those images in my head when I have already decided how this situation will be resolved," he says, and there is an edge of dark humor in his tone that I never expected to hear. "But this child deserves to be wanted, deserves to be anticipated, and I need to understand what I am claiming, what I am choosing to call mine." His honesty surprises me, disarms me, and I find myself turning in his arms to look at his face in the dim light from the fireplace, trying to understand this man who can threaten murder in one breath and speak of a child deserving to be wanted in the next. "I don't know yet if it's a boy or a girl," I begin hesitantly, my hand joining his on my stomach, and I marvel at how our fingers intertwine there, how natural it feels despite the circumstances. I only took the test this morning. Yesterday morning now, I suppose. And I haven't been to a doctor yet. Haven't done anything except stare at those 2 pink lines and try to figure out how to survive telling you the truth. I take a shaky breath, feeling tears threaten again at the memory of that panic, that certainty that I was about to die. But I have been feeling different for a few weeks now, exhausted in ways I have never experienced, nauseous at the strangest times, and my breasts have been tender enough that I could not ignore it anymore, could not pretend it was just stress or some passing illness. Dante's thumb brushes over my knuckles where our hands rest joined on my belly, encouraging me to continue. And I find myself talking about symptoms and timeline, about the terror and wonder of realizing I was growing a life inside me. And he listens with an attention I have never experienced from him before, his eyes never leaving my face, his body relaxed against mine in a way that speaks of genuine interest rather than mere tolerance. When I finally fall silent, emotionally wrung out, and physically exhausted, Dante surprises me yet again by pressing a kiss to my forehead. The gesture so tender, so unexpected that it breaks something open inside my chest. We will go to the doctor tomorrow, today rather, since it is already past 3 in the morning, he tells me, his voice firm with decision. I will have my personal physician come to the penthouse so you do not need to worry about being seen at a clinic or dealing with the gossip that would inevitably follow. And we will find out everything there is to know about this baby's health and development. His hand spreads wider across my stomach, as if he can somehow encompass the tiny life there with his palm. And then we will begin planning the nursery, arranging for everything a child could possibly need. And I will make certain that everyone in our world knows that Dante Moretti is about to become a father, that my wife is carrying my heir, and anyone who suggests otherwise will find themselves at the bottom of the Hudson River. The casual way he mentions murder, the seamless transition from tender concern to brutal threat, should probably disturb me more than it does. But I have lived in this world long enough to understand that violence is simply the language men like Dante speak, the currency with which they conduct their business and protect what is theirs. And I am beginning to understand that I am now firmly in that category of things he considers his to protect. Sleep pulls at me despite the turmoil of my thoughts, despite the strangeness of being held in Dante's arms for the first time in our marriage, and I feel myself beginning to drift, my body finally succumbing to the exhaustion of this emotionally devastating night. But just before unconsciousness claims me, I hear Dante speak again, his voice so quiet I almost miss the words. My mother died bringing me into this world, he murmurs against my hair, and there is a rawness in his tone that I have never heard before, a vulnerability that seems almost painful for him to express. She hemorrhaged during delivery, and my father always blamed me for her death, always looked at me with resentment because I was the reason he lost the only woman he ever loved. His arms tighten around me fractionally, and I feel him press his face into my hair, as if seeking comfort, as if needing to ground himself in my presence. I will not lose you, Isabella. Will not allow history to repeat itself, and I will make certain you have the best medical care available throughout this pregnancy. Will ensure that no harm comes to either you or this baby, because you are mine to protect now, mine to keep safe, and I have never failed to protect what belongs to me. His words settle over me like a blanket, simultaneously comforting and terrifying. A promise and a threat wrapped together so tightly I cannot separate one from the other, and I realize with startling clarity that Dante Moretti is not offering me freedom or even happiness, but rather a different kind of cage, one lined with luxury and protection, and a possessive devotion that might be more dangerous than indifference ever was. I drift into sleep wrapped in his arms, his hand never leaving my stomach, and my last coherent thought is that I have made a bargain with the devil himself, and only time will tell whether I have saved myself and my baby, or condemned us to something far worse than death, because belonging to a man like Dante means surrendering everything I am, everything I could be, to his overwhelming need to possess. to control, to own every aspect of my existence. I wake to sunlight streaming through those floor-to-ceiling windows and the unfamiliar sensation of being watched. And when I force my eyes open, I find Dante already awake, already dressed in another impeccable suit, sitting on the edge of the bed with a cup of what smells like herbal tea in his hand and an expression on his face that is almost soft, almost tender, as he studies my sleep, rumpled form tangled in his sheets. "Good morning, wife," he says. And there is satisfaction in the way he says the word, as if he is tasting it for the first time, finding new meaning in a title he has used perfunctorily for months. I have already called the doctor, and he will be here within the hour, and I have also taken the liberty of having cook prepare ginger tea and dry toast, which I am told are helpful for morning sickness. He hands me the cup, and I take it automatically, still trying to reconcile this attentive version of Dante with the cold, distant man I have known, still trying to understand what game he is playing, or what he hopes to gain from this performance of husbandly concern. The day passes in a blur of activity that feels surreal, dreamlike, as Dante's personal physician arrives with an ultrasound machine and enough medical equipment to fill a small clinic. And I lie on that massive bed, while Dante holds my hand with surprising gentleness, and we both stare at the screen that shows a tiny blob of cells that the doctor assures us is a perfectly healthy embryo, approximately 8 weeks along. I watch Dante's face as he looks at that screen, watch something fierce and primitive flash across his features when the doctor points out the flickering heartbeat, and I realize with a jolt of shock that his claim to this baby is not just strategic, not just about saving face or maintaining his reputation, but genuine, that he has somehow already bonded with this child in the few hours since learning of its existence. And the realization terrifies me because it means there is no going back, no way to undo what I have set in motion. The rest of the day continues in the same surreal fashion, with Dante canceling meetings to stay by my side, ordering his staff to bring me anything I might possibly want, discussing nursery designs and baby names with an enthusiasm that feels wildly out of character for the ruthless Mafia boss I thought I knew. And through it all, I play the role he has demanded of me, smiling and nodding and pretending that this is all perfectly normal, that I am not screaming inside at the strangeness of it all, at the way my entire life has been upended in the space of a single night. It is not until late afternoon, when I am resting on the sofa in Dante's private sitting room, with his jacket draped over me like a blanket, and his hand resting possessively on my hip as he works on his laptop beside me, that the fragile bubble of domesticity is shattered by the arrival of the one person I have been simultaneously longing for and dreading to see. Marco lets himself into the penthouse using the family access code, calling out a greeting as he makes his way through the halls toward Dante's office, where he clearly expects to find his cousin. And I feel every muscle in my body tense at the sound of his voice, feel panic rise in my throat like bile because I am not ready for this, not ready to face him while sitting here in the intimate aftermath of Dante's claiming, not ready to lie to the man I thought I loved while pretending to be devoted to the man I have betrayed him with. Dante's hand tightens on my hip in warning, his eyes meeting mine with an expression that clearly communicates his expectations, and I force myself to take a deep breath, to school my features into something resembling calm, to prepare myself for the performance that will either save Marco's life or condemn us all, because the moment he walks into this room and sees me here, sees the way Dante touches me, sees the changes that have already begun between us, everything will change forever. Marco appears in the doorway of the sitting room, his warm brown eyes finding me immediately, and I watch confusion flash across his handsome features as he takes in the scene before him, me curled on the sofa, wearing nothing but one of Dante's shirts that falls to mid-thigh, his jacket covering me, his hand resting on my body with casual ownership, the unmistakable intimacy of our positioning. "Isabella?" he says, my name a question, and I hear the hurt underlying the confusion, the betrayal that he is trying to hide but that colors his voice anyway. and I force myself to smile at him, to reach for Dante's hand and lace my fingers through his, as if it is the most natural thing in the world, as if I have not spent the past 6 months desperately wishing those hands touching me were Marco's instead. "Marco, what a pleasant surprise," I say, and I am amazed at how steady my voice sounds, how convincing I can be when my survival depends on it, and I watch something die in Marco's eyes as he registers the affection in my tone, the way I lean into Dante's touch rather than pulling away. "Dante and I were just discussing nursery colors. We found out this morning that we are going to have a baby, and he has been absolutely wonderful about the whole thing, so attentive and excited." The lie flows off my tongue like honey, sweet and poisonous, and I see it land like a physical blow, see Marco's face go pale as he processes what I have just told him, doing the mental math that will tell him this baby was conceived right around the time he ended our affair, and I watch him struggle to reconcile the timeline with his memories of our last encounter, with his certainty that I was heartbroken when he walked away. Dante's thumb strokes over my knuckles where our hands are joined, and when he speaks, his voice carries undertones of satisfaction that only I am close enough to detect, undertones of triumph that he is careful to keep hidden from his cousin. "We were going to announce it at this weekend's family dinner, but since you are here, we might as well share the good news," he says smoothly. And then he does something that makes my heart stutter in my chest. He pulls me into his lap, arranging me against him with a possessiveness that is impossible to miss, and presses a kiss to my temple that looks tender, loving, completely authentic to anyone who does not know the truth. Isabella has made me the happiest man alive, and I find myself looking forward to fatherhood with an anticipation I never expected to feel. His hand finds my stomach again, resting there in a gesture that is both protective and claiming, and I force myself not to flinch, not to reveal the turmoil churning inside me as I participate in this elaborate deception. Marco's eyes are fixed on Dante's hand on my stomach, on the way I am nestled in his cousin's lap, as if I belong there. And I watch realization dawn across his features, watch him understand that whatever he and I shared is truly over, burned away by the reality of my pregnancy and my apparent reconciliation with my husband. And the devastation in his expression makes my chest ache with guilt, even as I maintain my smile, even as I play the role Dante has demanded I play. "That is wonderful news, cousin," Marco manages to say, though his voice is rough with barely suppressed emotion, and he tears his gaze away from us to look around the room, anywhere but at the intimate tableau we present. "I came to discuss the shipment arriving tomorrow, but perhaps this conversation can wait for a better time, when you are not otherwise occupied with celebrating." He backs toward the door, as if he cannot bear to remain in the room a moment longer, and I feel tears prick at the corners of my eyes at the sight of his pain, at the knowledge that I am causing it, that I am destroying him with my lies even as I tell myself it is to protect him, to save his life from the consequences of our mutual betrayal. "Stay for dinner, Marco," Dante says, and it is not a request but a command, his tone brooking no argument. And I realize with dawning horror that he is going to make Marco sit through an entire meal watching us play the devoted couple, is going to force his cousin to endure hours of this torture. And I do not know if this is strategic, ensuring that Marco is completely convinced of our reconciliation, or if there is some dark part of Dante that takes satisfaction in making his rival suffer, in demonstrating exactly how thoroughly he has claimed what Marco once possessed. "We are having cook prepare osso buco tonight, your favorite if I remember correctly, and I insist you join us to celebrate this happy news properly." His hand moves in slow circles on my stomach, and I feel trapped between these two men, caught in a web of lies and manipulation that grows more tangled with every passing moment. And I realize that this is my life now, this constant performance, this exhausting maintenance of an illusion that protects us all, even as it slowly destroys me from the inside. Marco agrees because he has no choice, because refusing would raise questions he cannot afford to have asked, and as he disappears to freshen up before dinner, I feel Dante's lips brush against my ear, feel his breath hot against my skin as he whispers words that send ice flooding through my veins. You looked at him like you still love him, like you are mourning what you lost. And that ends now, Isabella. Because by the time this evening is over, by the time I am done demonstrating exactly how devoted we are to each other, he will believe that your heart belongs to me, and me alone, and you will make him believe it, because the alternative is a bullet in his brain, and your child growing up without anyone to blame but you for their father's death. 3 months have passed since that terrible, transformative night when I confessed my betrayal to Dante, and he claimed me with a possessiveness that has only intensified with each day that follows. And I find myself living in a reality so drastically different from the cold, lonely existence I inhabited before that sometimes I wake in the early morning hours, wrapped in Dante's arms, with his hand resting protectively on my now visible baby bump, and wonder if I am dreaming. If this strange new life where my husband actually seems to care about me is some elaborate fantasy my desperate mind has constructed to cope with a much darker truth. The changes have been gradual but inexorable, like the slow transformation of seasons, with Dante methodically dismantling every wall between us, every defense I had erected to protect myself from the emptiness of our arranged marriage, and replacing them with an intimacy that is simultaneously intoxicating and terrifying, because I know, somewhere deep in the part of my soul that still remembers who I was before all of this, that I am falling for the very man I once feared, that the lines between performance and reality have blurred beyond recognition. My body has transformed in these months, my belly swelling with the undeniable evidence of the life growing inside me, and Dante has been obsessed with every change, his hands constantly finding my stomach whether we are alone in our bedroom or attending one of the countless social functions that are required of us as the premier power couple of New York's criminal underworld. And there is something almost reverent in the way he touches me now, as if I am infinitely precious, infinitely fragile, something to be protected and cherished rather than merely possessed. He has hired the best obstetrician in the city, a woman who makes house calls to our penthouse twice a week to monitor my health and the baby's development, and he attends every appointment with an intensity that suggests he is memorizing every word the doctor says, every measurement she takes. And when we learned 2 weeks ago that we are having a daughter, I watched this hardened Mafia boss actually tear up as he looked at the ultrasound image of the baby girl who will enter the world believing she is a Moretti by blood as well as by name. The nursery has become Dante's passion project, and he has spared no expense in creating a space that looks like something from a fairy tale, all soft pinks and creams and gold accents, with a hand-carved crib imported from Italy that probably cost more than most people make in a year, and custom murals on the walls depicting enchanted forests and magical creatures, and a rocking chair upholstered in the softest velvet where he insists we will take turns soothing our daughter when she cannot sleep. I catch him sometimes, standing in the doorway of that perfect room with an expression on his face that I cannot fully decipher, something that looks like longing mixed with determination, mixed with a tenderness I never imagined he was capable of feeling. And in those unguarded moments I see glimpses of the man he might have been if he had not been born into this world of violence and power, if he had been allowed to be soft, to be vulnerable, to love without the constant calculation of advantage and liability. But it is not just the nursery, or the doctor's appointments, or the expensive gifts he showers on me with almost compulsive frequency. Silk maternity clothes from designers I cannot pronounce, jewelry that glitters with stones worth more than small countries, a custom Bentley with every safety feature imaginable because he refuses to let me ride in anything less secure. It is the way he has inserted himself into every aspect of my existence with a thoroughness that leaves no room for the person I used to be, the woman who spent her days in isolated luxury and her nights dreaming of escape. He works from home more often than not now, his office relocated to a room adjacent to our bedroom so he can be close to me, can check on me throughout the day, and he has rearranged his entire empire around my comfort, my needs, my pregnancy, as if the most powerful criminal organization in New York exists solely to ensure that Isabella Moretti and her unborn daughter have everything they could possibly require. The physical intimacy between us has evolved into something that makes my previous relationship with Marco seem like a pale shadow, a childish infatuation compared to the consuming passion that Dante demands from me every night, and sometimes in the afternoons when he decides he cannot concentrate on work without tasting me first, without reminding himself and me exactly who I belong to now. He has learned my body with the same meticulous attention to detail he brings to his business dealings, cataloging every sensitive spot, every touch that makes me gasp or arch into him, every word whispered in Italian that turns my bones to liquid, and he uses this knowledge ruthlessly, pulling responses from me that I did not know I was capable of giving, pushing me to heights of pleasure that leave me shaking and disoriented and completely undone in his arms. And afterward he holds me with a possessiveness that should feel suffocating, but instead feels like safety, like belonging, like coming home to a place I never knew existed. I tell myself that what I feel for him is just my body responding to his skill, just hormones from the pregnancy, making me more susceptible to his manipulations, just the natural result of spending every waking and sleeping moment in close proximity to a man who has made it his mission to make me need him, to make me crave him, to replace every thought of Marco with thoughts of him instead. But late at night when he whispers endearments against my skin and tells me I am beautiful, tells me he cannot imagine his life without me anymore, tells me our daughter is the greatest gift I could have given him, even though we both know the truth of her paternity, I feel something in my chest crack open, feel emotions I swore I would never allow myself to feel for this dangerous man, and I realize with dawning horror that Dante's prediction is coming true, that the ghost of what I felt for Marco is fading like morning mist burned away by the intensity of what Dante makes me feel. Marco himself has become a ghost in our lives, present but not present, attending family functions with a smile that never reaches his eyes anymore, watching from a distance as Dante plays the devoted husband with an enthusiasm that seems to grow more genuine with each passing week. And I catch Marco looking at me sometimes with an expression of such profound loss that it makes my heart ache, makes me want to pull him aside and explain that this is all just an elaborate performance, that I am only playing a role to protect him. But the truth is that I am no longer certain what is performance and what is reality anymore. No longer certain where the mask ends and the truth begins. He has grown quieter, more withdrawn, throwing himself into his work with Dante's organization with an intensity that borders on reckless. And I hear whispers from the other wives at our social gatherings that Marco has been seen at clubs with a rotating series of beautiful women, that he is drinking too much, that he seems to be courting danger in ways that make even hardened criminals nervous. And I wonder if my lies, my performance, my betrayal of what we once shared is destroying him slowly. If he would be better off knowing the truth, even if that truth would get him killed. The family dinner, where we announced my pregnancy, was an exercise in torture that I have had to repeat at countless gatherings since, with Dante's hand constantly on my stomach, his lips pressing kisses to my temple or my cheek, with a frequency that seems excessive even for newlyweds. And the family has eaten it up, cooing over how love has transformed their cold, ruthless Dante into a man who cannot seem to keep his hands off his wife, who looks at her like she hung the moon and stars. And I smile and blush and play my part while Marco sits across the table, looking like he is being flayed alive. And I hate myself for enjoying the attention, even as I know it is all built on lies. Dante's mother, no, his stepmother, the woman his father married a decade after Dante's birth mother died, has taken to calling me daily to discuss baby preparations and offer unsolicited advice, and she tells me repeatedly how happy she is that Dante has finally found love, finally opened his heart, finally become the man she always knew he could be. And I nod and agree and thank her while feeling like a fraud, like an imposter in a life that was never meant to be mine. But it is in the small moments, the ones that happen when there is no audience to perform for, no expectations to meet, that I find myself most confused about what is real and what is fabrication. Like when Dante comes home after a particularly brutal business meeting. And I know it was brutal because I can see the blood on his shirt cuffs, can smell the gunpowder and fear that clings to him like cologne. And the first thing he does is seek me out, find me wherever I am in the penthouse, and pull me into his arms as if I am the antidote to whatever poison his work has injected into his soul. He buries his face in my hair and breathes me in like he is drowning and I am oxygen. And his hands find my belly with a desperation that suggests he needs to touch life, needs to remind himself of creation after spending hours dealing in destruction. And in those moments I want so badly to believe that this is real, that I matter to him beyond strategic necessity, that the baby I am carrying has somehow transformed him into someone capable of genuine love, rather than just possessive obsession. The morning sickness that plagued my first trimester has given way to a voracious appetite and strange cravings that Dante indulges with almost comical seriousness, sending his drivers across the city at 3 a.m. to fetch specific flavors of gelato, or tracking down obscure Italian delicacies that remind me of my grandmother's cooking. And he sits with me while I eat these strange combinations that should not work together but somehow do, watching me with an expression of fond amusement that transforms his usually severe features into something almost boyish, almost innocent. He talks to my belly when he thinks I am asleep. Long conversations in Italian where he tells our daughter about the world he is building for her, the empire she will inherit, the ways he will protect her from every possible harm, and he promises her that she will never doubt she is loved, never feel the cold indifference his own father showed him, never wonder if she is wanted or valued or cherished. And listening to these whispered promises from a man who kills without remorse breaks something in me, makes me understand that Dante is not just claiming this baby out of strategy or pride, but out of a desperate need to rewrite his own childhood, to be the father he never had. It is during one of these quiet domestic evenings, with me curled on the sofa, reading baby name books while Dante works on his laptop beside me, his hand resting on my swollen belly, as if he cannot bear not to be touching me, that the fragile bubble of our happiness shatters with the force of a bullet through glass, because my phone buzzes with a text message from an unknown number, and when I open it, my blood turns to ice in my veins as I read the words that will destroy everything we have built. I know the truth about Lucia, the message reads, and my hands start shaking so badly that I nearly drop the phone, because we have already chosen the name for our daughter, Lucia, after Dante's mother, the woman who died bringing him into the world. And the fact that this unknown sender knows that name, knows to use it, suggests they are close to us, close enough to overhear private conversations, close enough to threaten everything. Dante notices my sudden tension immediately, his predator's instincts alert to any change in my demeanor, and he takes the phone from my trembling hands before I can stop him, his eyes scanning the message with a speed that speaks of a mind trained to process threats and calculate responses in microseconds. I watch his expression transform from confusion to fury, to something cold and deadly that makes my stomach clench with terror. And when he looks at me, his eyes are chips of steel, all the warmth and tenderness of moments ago burned away by the realization that someone knows our secret. Someone has discovered the truth we have worked so hard to hide, and I can see him calculating, planning, deciding who must die to protect what is his. And I realize with awful clarity that the time for pretending is over, that our carefully constructed lie is about to be tested in ways that might destroy us all. "How long has Marco been texting you?" Dante asks, his voice deceptively calm, deceptively soft. But I can hear the rage simmering beneath the surface, can feel the violence coiled in his body like a spring wound too tight. And I shake my head frantically because this is not from Marco. Cannot be from Marco. Because Marco does not know about the baby's true paternity, does not know that Lucia is his daughter. And if this message is suggesting that he has discovered the truth, then everything I have done, every lie I have told. Every performance I have given has been for nothing. It is not Marco, I manage to say, my voice barely above a whisper, and I reach for my phone with hands that will not stop shaking, scrolling through my messages to show Dante that there is no previous communication from this number, no history that would suggest ongoing contact with his cousin. And I watch him process this information. Watch him realize that if this threat is not coming from Marco, then it is coming from someone else, someone who has been watching us, studying us, waiting for the perfect moment to use this knowledge as leverage or blackmail, or simply as a way to tear down the empire Dante has built on loyalty and fear and respect. Before either of us can speak again, before Dante can tell me what he plans to do about this threat, my phone buzzes again, and this time, the message makes my heart stop entirely, makes the room spin around me with vertigo so intense I think I might actually be sick. Meet me at the Pier 45 warehouse in 1 hour. Come alone, or I tell Dante everything and let him decide what to do with you and Marco. The message reads, and attached to it is a photograph that steals the breath from my lungs, a picture that can only have been taken by someone who was there, who witnessed what should have been private. And the image shows me and Marco in that hotel room 3 weeks before I discovered I was pregnant, tangled together in sheets with our faces clearly visible, with the tenderness and passion between us undeniable. And I know with absolute certainty that whoever sent this has enough evidence to destroy not just me but Marco as well, to prove beyond any doubt that I betrayed Dante, that Lucia is not his biological daughter, and the carefully constructed life we have built over these past 3 months is about to come crashing down around us. Dante sees the photograph before I can close the message, and the sound that comes from his throat is something between a growl and a roar, something primal and violent that makes every instinct in my body scream at me to run, to get as far away from him as possible before his rage finds its target. But I am frozen in place, my hands instinctively covering my belly, as if I can somehow protect our daughter from the fallout of my mistakes. And when Dante stands from the sofa, with movements that are almost inhumanly controlled, given the fury radiating from him like heat from a furnace, I know that the reckoning I have been dreading since the night I confessed is finally here, and there will be no more pretending, no more performance, no more hiding behind the illusion of a marriage transformed by love. You are not going to that warehouse, Dante says, and his voice is so cold, so absolutely devoid of emotion, that it is more terrifying than any shouting could be. And he takes my phone from my hands with a gentleness that contradicts the violence I can see brewing in his eyes. You are going to stay here, in our bedroom, under guard, while I go and deal with whoever thinks they can threaten what is mine. And when I return, we are going to have a very long conversation about exactly how many lies you have been telling me, about whether any of the past 3 months have been real, or if I have been playing the fool while you laugh at me behind my back. His hand reaches out to cut my face with a tenderness that makes tears spill down my cheeks, and I see something that might be pain flash across his features before it disappears behind that mask of cold control. Did you ever really want this, Isabella? Did you ever actually fall for me the way I have fallen for you? Or has this entire time been nothing but an elaborate performance to save Marco's worthless life? The question hangs in the air between us like a blade, and I realize with perfect clarity that this is the moment that will define everything that comes after. That my answer right now will determine not just my fate but Marco's, and possibly even our daughter's. Because if Dante believes that I have been manipulating him, using his feelings against him while secretly longing for another man, then the violence he is capable of will know no bounds, will consume everything and everyone I care about in flames of retribution. I look into his eyes, those steel-gray eyes that have somehow become the first thing I think of when I wake, and the last thing I see before I sleep. And I make a choice that terrifies me with its honesty, with its vulnerability, with its complete abandonment of the protective lies I have been hiding behind. I love you, I whisper, and the words feel like jumping off a cliff with no certainty of what waits at the bottom, like exposing the softest part of myself to the man most capable of destroying me. and I watch shock flicker across Dante's face as if this is the last thing he expected me to say, as if he was braced for lies or manipulation or desperate placation, but not this raw truth. I did not plan to, did not want to, fought against it with everything I had, because loving you feels like betraying myself, betraying everything I thought I wanted. But these past 3 months have broken down every wall I built, and when you touch me now, I do not think about Marco. Do not wish you were someone else. Do not pretend that your hands are his, and that terrifies me more than any threat ever could because I know you could destroy me, could take this love I feel and weaponize it against me, could use it to hurt me in ways that no physical violence ever could. 6 months after Lucia's birth, I have built a life that feels so real, so solid, so fundamentally true, that sometimes I forget it began with lies and betrayal and a desperate bargain struck in the darkest hours of night. And as I sit in the nursery watching Dante cradle our daughter, because she is ours now in every way that matters, in every way except the biology that we have both chosen to ignore, I feel a happiness so complete, so overwhelming that it terrifies me with its fragility, with the knowledge that everything I have could be destroyed in an instant if the wrong person discovers the truth we have buried beneath layers of love and devotion, and a family that has become more real than any blood connection could ever be. Lucia is perfect in the way that all babies are perfect, with Dante's dark hair and eyes that are still the indeterminate blue of infancy, but that I secretly hope will turn brown like Marco's, though I would never admit that hope aloud. And she has wrapped her father around her tiny fingers, with an efficiency that would be amusing if it were not so touching, because the most feared Mafia boss in New York becomes pudding in the hands of this 6-month-old girl who rules our household with her cries and her smiles and her absolute certainty that the world exists solely to serve her needs. Dante has been transformed by fatherhood in ways I never could have predicted, in ways that make me fall deeper in love with him every single day, because he is tender with Lucia in ways he has never been tender with anyone else, patient when she cries at 3 a.m, delighted by her every milestone no matter how small, and he talks to her constantly in a mixture of English and Italian, telling her stories about her grandmother, his mother, whose name she carries, and promising her that she will grow up knowing she is loved, knowing she is valued, knowing she is the center of his universe in ways that make my heart ache with the beauty and tragedy of it all. We have settled into a routine that feels domestic and normal, and almost peaceful, with Dante working from home most days so he can be close to us, with family dinners where Lucia sits in her high chair and smears food everywhere while the most dangerous men in the criminal underworld coo over her, like she is the second coming, and with nights where the 3 of us curl up in the massive bed that has become the center of our lives, Lucia sleeping between us in her bassinet, while Dante and I reach for each other across her small body, our fingers intertwining in the darkness as if to reassure ourselves that this is real, that we have somehow built something worth keeping out of the ashes of betrayal and lies. But the past has a way of refusing to stay buried, especially in a world where secrets are currency and loyalty is tested constantly, and it is at Lucia's christening party, a lavish affair attended by every important family in our organization, held at the Moretti estate with champagne flowing and a string quartet playing and enough security to protect a head of state, that the carefully constructed facade of our perfect life begins to crumble in ways I should have anticipated, but somehow did not. Because I have been so lost in the happiness of playing house with Dante and our daughter that I forgot we are still living in a world where blood and violence are the only languages that truly matter. Marco has been distant these past months, attending family functions out of obligation, but always leaving early, always finding excuses to avoid extended contact with me or Dante, or especially with Lucia, whose existence seems to cause him physical pain, and I have told myself that his withdrawal is healthy, that it means he is moving on, that he is accepting the reality that what we had is over, and I belong to Dante now in every possible way. But I should have recognized the signs, should have seen the danger brewing beneath his careful politeness and forced smiles. I am in the garden of the estate, having escaped the crowd inside for a moment of peace, holding Lucia against my shoulder while she drowses in the afternoon sun. When Marco appears beside me with the quietness of a ghost, and when I turn to look at him, I see something in his eyes that makes my blood run cold. Something that speaks of knowledge and pain and a rage that has been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. "We need to talk, Isabella," he says, and his voice is rough with emotion barely contained. And before I can respond or call for help, or do anything except stand there frozen with my daughter in my arms, he reaches out and touches Lucia's dark hair with fingers that tremble. And I watch his face transform as he studies her features, with an intensity that suggests he is searching for something, comparing her to memories or photographs, or perhaps to his own reflection. "She has my mother's nose," he says softly, and the words land like bombs between us, shattering the fragile peace I have built. Because his mother and Dante's mother are different women. And if Lucia has features from Marco's side of the family, then it means he knows, has somehow figured out the truth that we have worked so desperately to hide. And I feel panic rise in my throat like bile as I realize that everything I have built is about to come crashing down around me. "I had her blood typed," Marco continues, his voice gaining strength, gaining anger. And he looks at me with an expression of such profound betrayal that it makes me want to weep. Want to beg for forgiveness? Want to explain that I did this to protect him, to save his life. But the words stick in my throat as he continues speaking. "During the pediatric visit last month when Dante asked me to take her because you were sick and he had an emergency meeting, I had the doctor run a simple test, and the results came back showing a blood type that is genetically impossible for Dante to have fathered. And I have spent the past month trying to convince myself that there must be some explanation, some medical miracle, some reason other than the obvious one. But I cannot lie to myself anymore, cannot pretend that I do not know the truth." His hand drops from Lucia's hair, and he steps back as if proximity to us burns him. And I see tears streaming down his face now. See the devastation of a man who has discovered he has a daughter but cannot claim her, cannot acknowledge her, cannot be her father in any way except biology. She is mine, Isabella, my daughter, my blood, and you have kept her from me. Let Dante raise her as his own. Stolen from me the one thing that might have given my life meaning, and I will not, let this stand any longer. I open my mouth to explain, to plead, to somehow make him understand that this was the only way to keep him alive, that Dante would have killed him if he had known the truth, that I made the only choice available to me in an impossible situation. But before I can speak, before I can begin to defend my actions or beg for his understanding, I see Dante emerge from the house, his eyes immediately finding me in the garden, and I watch his expression shift from concern to suspicion, to cold rage as he takes in the scene before him. Marco standing too close, the tears on both our faces, the way I am clutching Lucia as if she is a shield against the storm that is about to break over all our heads. Dante moves toward us with the predatory grace of a big cat stalking prey, and I see in his face that he has heard enough of our conversation to understand what is happening, to know that his worst fear has been realized, that Marco has discovered the truth about Lucia's paternity, and the violence I see brewing in his eyes tells me that the man I love is about to become the monster I once feared, and there is nothing I can do to stop what is about to happen. "Step away from my wife and daughter, Marco," Dante says, his voice so cold, so utterly devoid of emotion that it is more terrifying than any shouting could be. And I watch Marco straighten his spine, watch him meet Dante's eyes with a defiance born of pain and loss and righteous anger. And I know that we have reached the point of no return, the moment where all the lies and secrets and carefully maintained facades shatter like glass, leaving nothing but the ugly truth and the violence that will inevitably follow. The air in the garden feels thick enough to choke on as I stand frozen between the two men who have defined my entire existence for the past year and a half. With my daughter, our daughter, Dante's daughter, Marco's daughter, the living embodiment of every lie I have told and every truth I have tried to bury, nestled against my chest, her tiny heartbeat fluttering against mine like a trapped bird. And I realize that this moment has been inevitable since the night I first confessed my betrayal to Dante, that all the months of playing house and falling in love and building a family were simply a reprieve, a temporary paradise before the reckoning that was always going to come. I watch Dante's hand move toward the gun. I know he keeps holstered beneath his jacket. Watch the cold calculation in his eyes as he assesses Marco not as his cousin, not as his second in command, not as the boy he grew up with and trusted with his life, but as a threat to everything he has claimed as his own. And I know with absolute certainty that if I do not do something right now, in this moment, I am going to watch the father of my child murder the biological father of my child, and Lucia will grow up in the shadow of that violence, will be forever marked by the blood spilled in her name. "Stop," I say, and my voice comes out stronger than I expected, loud enough to cut through the terrible tension crackling between them, like electricity before a storm, and both men turn to look at me with expressions that mirror each other in their intensity, in their pain, in their absolute conviction that they are right and the other is wrong. "Both of you just stop, because Lucia does not deserve to have her christening party destroyed by this, does not deserve to have her first major life event become the backdrop for violence and accusations and the revelation of secrets that should have stayed buried. And I will not, I cannot, let either of you destroy what we have built, what we have become, because of pride or possession or some misguided sense of biological entitlement." I turn to Marco first, because he is the one who has forced this confrontation, who has shattered the fragile peace we had achieved, and I let him see the anger and pain and desperate fear in my eyes as I speak. "You ended our affair, Marco, walked away and told me that loyalty to Dante and the family was more important than what we felt for each other, and I respected that decision, accepted it even though it broke my heart. And when I discovered I was pregnant, I had to make a choice that no woman should ever have to make. And I chose life. My life. Your life. And the life of the baby I was carrying, over some romantic notion of truth and honesty that would have gotten us all killed." Marco flinches as if I have struck him, and I see fresh tears spill down his cheeks as he processes my words, as he begins to understand that the decision I made was not about choosing Dante over him, but about survival in a world where love is a luxury that can get you killed, and loyalty to the family is the only currency that matters. "You should have told me," he says, his voice breaking on the words, and I see such anguish in his expression that it makes my own heart crack, makes me remember why I fell for him in the first place, remember the gentleness and warmth and genuine care that he showed me when I was drowning in loneliness. "You should have trusted me enough to tell me the truth, and let me decide how to handle it. Let me be part of the solution instead of keeping me in the dark for over a year while I watched you play happy family with my cousin and my daughter, watched you fall in love with him while I died inside knowing that I had given up the only real thing I ever had." His eyes move to Lucia, sleeping peacefully in my arms, oblivious to the storm raging around her, and I watch something crumble in his face as he looks at her. She will never know me as her father, will never call me Papa, will never understand that I exist as anything more than Dante's cousin. And that knowledge is killing me, Isabella, destroying me from the inside out. I turn to Dante next, this man who has become my entire world in ways I never intended, never planned for, never thought possible. And I see that his hand has moved away from his gun, but his body is still coiled tight with barely controlled violence, still ready to strike if Marco makes one wrong move. And I need him to understand what Marco cannot, what the past months have taught me about love and family, and the difference between biology and choice. "Dante," I say softly, stepping toward him with Lucia still cradled against me, and I watch his eyes flick to our daughter, his daughter, because she is his in every way that counts, before returning to my face. "Marco is right that Lucia shares his DNA, that biology makes him her father in the most technical, scientific sense, but you are the one who has been her papa since before she was born, who talked to my belly every night and promised her the world, who was there when I went into labor and held my hand through every contraction, who cried when the doctor placed her in your arms for the first time, who gets up at 3 a.m. when she cries and rocks her back to sleep while singing Italian lullabies that your mother used to sing to you. And that makes you her father in every way that actually matters, in every way that will shape who she becomes and how she sees herself and what she knows about being loved. I watch Dante's expression shift as I speak. Watch the violence drain from his eyes to be replaced by something that looks like relief, like gratitude, like a desperate need to believe what I am telling him, and I press my advantage, needing him to understand that what we have built is real, is worth protecting, is worth more than pride or revenge or the satisfaction of punishing Marco for a crime that was as much mine as his. I fell in love with you, Dante Moretti, not because you forced me to, not because I was playing a role or trying to save my own skin, but because you showed me what it means to be cherished, to be valued, to be someone's entire world. And when I look at you now, I do not see the cold, distant man I married. Do not remember the loneliness of those first months. Do not think about what might have been with Marco, because you have filled every empty space inside me with your presence, your devotion, your absolutely maddening need to possess every piece of me. And I do not want to go back to a world where you are not the first person I see every morning and the last person I kiss every night. The words pour out of me in a rush, honest and raw and completely unguarded, and I watch Dante's face transform as he hears them, as he allows himself to believe that what we have is real, that I chose him not out of fear or necessity, but out of genuine love. The silence that follows my confession is broken by Marco's bitter laugh, harsh and broken and full of pain, and when he speaks, his voice is rough with unshed tears and acceptance of a loss that will haunt him for the rest of his life. I cannot compete with that, he says quietly, and I hear resignation in his tone, hear the death of hope, hear a man saying goodbye to the future he imagined for himself. I cannot offer her the empire you can, Dante, cannot protect her the way you can, cannot give her the life she deserves, and I will not tear apart this family, will not destroy what Isabella has built, will not take a father away from a little girl who will never know the difference if I just walk away and let you keep the lie. He looks at me one last time, his eyes memorizing my face as if he is saying goodbye forever, and then his gaze drops to Lucia, sleeping peacefully in my arms, and I see him mouth the words, "I love you," though no sound comes out. I am leaving New York, leaving the family, leaving everything behind, because I cannot stay here and watch you three be happy while I pretend that my heart is not breaking, and I am trusting you, cousin, to give my daughter, your daughter, everything I cannot, to love her mother the way I wish I could have, to build the family that I will never have. And if you fail in this, if you hurt either of them, I will come back and I will destroy you even if it costs me my life. Dante nods slowly, and I see something pass between the two men, some understanding that transcends words, some acknowledgement of shared loss and mutual respect, and the terrible weight of the choices we all made. And then Marco turns and walks away, his back straight and his steps measured, and I watch him disappear into the house, knowing that this is the last time I will ever see him as anything other than Dante's cousin, knowing that he is walking out of my life forever, and taking with him the ghost of who I used to be, who I might have become if the world were different and love were enough. Dante closes the distance between us and wraps his arms around both me and Lucia, pulling us against his chest as if he needs to feel us, needs to reassure himself that we are still his. And I feel his body shaking with emotion he rarely allows himself to show. And when he speaks, his voice is rough, with tears and relief, and a love so profound it takes my breath away. "You are mine," he whispers against my hair, and there is no threat in the words now, no demand for submission, just a simple statement of fact, a truth that we have both accepted. You and Lucia, you are my family, my heart, my entire reason for existing, and I will spend the rest of my life making certain you never regret choosing me, never doubt that you made the right decision, never wish you had chosen differently. 5 years later, I stand in the doorway of our home, watching Lucia play in the garden with her 2 younger siblings, a boy named Lorenzo and a girl named Sofia, both undeniably Dante's children, with their steel-gray eyes and his determined chin. And I marvel at how far we have come from that terrible night when I stood in Dante's office with a pregnancy test in my trembling hand and confessed the unforgivable. Lucia knows Dante as her papa, adores him with the fierce devotion only a daughter can have for the father who has given her the world, and she has no idea that the blood running through her veins tells a different story than the one she will grow up believing. And I have made peace with this lie, because it is the foundation upon which we have built a love that is more real, more true, more enduring than any biological connection could ever be. I cheated on the Mafia boss and became pregnant, and his reaction shocked everyone who knew us. Shocked me most of all, because Dante Moretti did not destroy me for my betrayal, did not cast me aside or punish me for my sins, but instead did something far more dangerous and unexpected and ultimately transformative. He loved me anyway, loved me through the lies and the fear and the impossible choices, loved me until I could not remember why I had ever wanted anything other than this life, this family, this man who became my salvation instead of my executioner. And in doing so, he taught me that family is not about blood or biology or the accidents of conception, but about the choices we make every single day to love, to protect, to cherish, and to build something beautiful out of the ashes of our mistakes.